But the super kind of neat thing about it is that it was built in response to the Kirkbride Plan, and the design was advocated by Philadelphia scientist and psychiatrist Thomas Story Kirkbride. His entire theory was focused on healing the mentally ill with exposure to natural light and circulation. It focused on a bat wing sort of plan where there was a center area and then there were two, quote, wings that would go off.
Okay.
And house other people there. It was in response by Dorothea Dix. Do you remember Dorothea Dix? Yeah.
No, not at all.
Dorothea Dix was a revolutionary person who... She was essentially a reporter that went into asylums because people were being maltreated there. And she aided the reform of areas so that they weren't shitting on themselves. And
yeah, so she was a real important person.
Yeah, so that no one was...
kind of like a badass.
Yeah, no one was involved in
One might say
filthy.
that she was the Laura Frizzo of her time.
Well, it was intended to be a beacon of light in the mental health facilities.
Yeah, that's the vibe I got, but I know that some shit's gonna go wrong.
The thing is, when this was something that was put into practice, it was pretty much one of the harsher time periods for them to be committed to a psychiatric institution in any capacity, because this was the time that the frontal lobotomy was coming into play, electroshock therapy was running rampant.
Were we doing the transorbital lobotomy by then?
1901, no. No, because that
okay.
was 1910s, right?
Yeah, I think so.
In this time period, obviously, that wasn't something that super worked, especially since tuberculosis was coming into more focus, and obviously it was affecting a lot more people. The areas that were intended to be very evenly spaced in the institution, it suddenly became overcrowded.
Yeah.
The most notable that was part of the Kirkbride Plan was the Trans-Allegheny Asylum.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, it's actually one of the first.
Oh, that's really fascinating.
Fun fact, the name given to this asylum has been known to mean, quote, completed or perfected in and of itself, or, quote, perfected, complete, or certain. As we've come to understand, a lot of buildings from this time period were incredibly susceptible to fire.
Okay.
In 1881 and again in 1895, a fire had devastated most of the grounds, specifically the fire in 1881. While the center was being rebuilt, temporary wooden barracks were built to house and take care of the new and now homeless. Obviously, they needed some place to exist and still get treatment.
Yeah.
They later converted that to a permanent structure and ward, even after the facility was rebuilt. An article in the 1901 New York Times describes a fire that broke out on the North Wing, 4th floor bathroom. It was said that after the staff got patients to safety, they tried to quell the flames, but the mansard roof...
The what?
Mansard roof. Like, fun fact about this, it's, if you look at old farmhouses where it has the peak, but then it looks like it wants to be a dome, but then they gave up in the middle of it and just made it, like, flat. You know the ones I'm talking about?
I do.
Yeah. There's almost a 90-degree slope on that. The roof, the mansard roof, had prevented their efforts till it had reached the center building. Because of the shape of it, it let the fire roam up the walls, or the walls would be completely on fire before they were able to actually get to it. And obviously that was something that was happening throughout the entirety of it, especially the wing area, until they got to the center building and were able to fight it pretty much only from there.
Yeah.
3 patients were discovered in a second-story room on the north wing that was completely surrounded by fire. They were only discovered because an effort of those patients to escape through a grated window. So there was a crowd gathering below, and it was mostly people that were coming from inside the building, right? And they looked up and saw that there were things being thrown out of one of the windows, which would obviously mean that someone is there.
Yeah.
They saw little hands, and when they realized that was happening...
Oh, God, did they get out?
Yeah. As it is a psych ward, they weren't able to get out because there was grating on the windows. Because they don't want people to jump to their death and or escape. A letter was placed against the building, but the heat had forced several rescuers down until a, quote, gallant fellow named Grace.
Grace the gallant fellow. Okay.
Yeah. New York Times tells me that he was gallant. He ran up a ladder, threw an axe through the window, and told one of the trapped to cut his way out. Two were able to get out, but Grace had to enter the burning room and, quote, after a hand-to-hand struggle with a patient named McCullen, apparently McCullen did not feel like he wanted to leave his room. Grace, quote, forced him headlong through the window and persons outside caught him.
Damn. He just like launched him like a torpedo out of the window.
That's how I visually see it. But
That's
I
like
hope
some Matilda
it's
shit.
Yeah. It is.
It's like Matilda.
Apparently, our gallant Mr. Grace
Yes.
had a bit of problems from the heat inhalation and smoke inhalation of going up the ladder.
Which will happen.
He did definitely survive.
Cool.
The only missing person or possibly dead was an N. Ferkel. I've read that he was missing and they weren't sure, and I've read that they had found his charred remains. It's rumored that after some of the buildings were burned and rebuilt, that basements and some of the underground tunnels were lost, but it isn't substantiated by any of the records. They say that they know where everything is and where it goes to, but they're not 100% sure, and also there's no record to back up the fact that anything was lost.
Mm-hmm.
The existing tunnels are not open to the public for insurance reasons. Duh.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally my exact thought was, of course they're not.
Yeah. The tunnels are still open to staff for transportation. Obviously, they need to be able to get between several buildings on the compound.
Yeah.
Some residents say that they reach across town, even reaching to some parts out of the county.
Oh, that's really interesting. Do you think that that's true?
I kind of don't, because there's a lot of people, when I was reading reviews and stuff like that, were saying that that wasn't a thing.
Because that's a pretty big statement, and that would have to be a pretty big system of tunnels.
A medical and surgical center was once used for lobotomies, electric shock treatments, and amputations.
Oh, great.
To this day, they're no longer used, but they still exist above a morgue with the original incinerator that was used to destroy discarded body parts.
Everything about that sounds awful.
A cemetery sits on the property, but almost none of the graves used between 1872 and 1939 have markers, and the number of graves isn't actually known. Overall, the occupancy of the total properties was about 750 patients, but that was what was allowed on the property. It wasn't the top amount that were staying there at any point in time.
Yeah.
Employees, both past and present, have told about strange sounds and occurrences, footsteps running past in an empty hallway. So nurses that are trying to visit patients will be completely alone in the hallway and hear someone running from the end of the hall directly past them, and their footsteps fade.
I wonder what that's like for like new nurses that start working there who don't know that.
Doors will often close even though there's no door in the particular hallway that they are in. There may or may not have used to be a door there, but
you can hear the sound of the door closing, even though it may not exactly be there anymore.
yes.
Do you think that's more of like a residual thing?
Well, and that's it. That's actually in my notes.
Oh.
They're thought to be residual energy from over 140 years of the institution's operation. People report seeing faces and figures in the building on different floors, as well as cottages reported to be haunted by nurses and prior residents. People have reported apparitions of people running and standing in windows. The second floor supposedly houses a little boy who was reported to have died in the 50s, and people have often claimed to have seen him during the night. Almost all the hauntings kind of seem residual. There's almost no interaction.
Okay. All right.
There
I mean,
are
but that
a
makes
few.
a lot of sense though, given the fact that it, was an institution.
The tunnels below are supposedly one of the most haunted areas and house some of the patients during storms. Like if there's a really horrible storm that's happening,
Yeah.
they'll bring most of the patients down into the tunnel because obviously anything underground, if there's tornadoes, which are huge in Illinois.
No, let the tornado kill me.
There is in one area a wide lit carpeted tunnel that's still used by some of the staff that connects the two buildings, where a nurse has been reported to refuse to go through after she was followed by what's quoted to be a misty figure.
Mm-hmm.
She was on a regular route to deliver meds. Some people believe that the tunnels meet the original jail cells under the Union County Courthouse, but there's no evidence either in records or in paranormal occurrences to be some of the blame for it.
Yeah.
Some people kind of think that because they've heard that the tunnels meet the jail cells is some sort of reactionary occurrence.
Okay. Do they though? Is it just a theory? Or?
I mean, I've found zero about that.
Okay.
It's one person like, no, there's nothing down there but wires. A man who had walked through the tunnels was touched by something and reported that it felt like a hand on his back. The graveyard that we talked about a little bit earlier, where they're not 100% sure where anyone's buried.
Which I don't think is great because not honoring the dead is typically never a great thing.
Right, but they also obviously didn't keep fastidious records.
Yeah, exactly.
Why though?
I
I get, like, things could get lost. Obviously, several fires.
But we're talking about
even
people...
in Oak Forest,
yeah.
they have some markers for it, but no one is apparently buried on the ground, but they are. The graveyard has reported sounds of sobbing, screaming, and otherworldly sounds coming through the graves. They hear it coming from under the ground, that are the keepers.
That's a bummer.
Okay, but I saved the best for last.
Oh, good.
The most famous occurrence was when a patient was heard screaming in his room like he was being attacked. Orderlies were able to open his room and turn on the lights to reveal the patient alone and with scratches covering his entire body. He described the attacker as a, quote, devil dog and wouldn't waver on that description. Absolutely no one could conclusively prove that the scratches came from him or from something else. They do paranormal tours sometimes, but everyone kind of says that they don't really see.
I mean, I'd go. Well, that was a really good story. Laura Frizzo, you have an invitation to come be our best friend and have martinis with us anytime you want.
Dude, I will cook you all the food and also make you all the drinks.
Yeah, and bring your nice gentleman friend too, because I would also like to pick his brain as much as I would like to pick your brain.
Yeah, and you guys can sleep on my sweet-ass purple bed, so...
But with that being said, we need to do a cheers. So, in the words of Frank Sinatra...
It's one of my favorites.
Here's to alcohol. It may be man's worst enemy, but the Bible says, love your enemy.
Oh, I'm so happy you used fucking Frank Sinatra.
Cheers. We're on Instagram. We are Shots in the Dark Podcast. We are also on Snapchat, or Shots in the Dark P. We're Shots in the Dark P on Twitter. We're on Facebook now. We're Shots in the Dark Pod. Our email address is shotsinthedarkpodcast@gmail.com.
We are also super excited. Obviously, earlier this week, we had put out a bonus episode.
Campfire Tales.
To announce that we're going to do Campfire Tales at least once a month. With that being said, we also need other people's Campfire Tales besides just our own and our personal friends.
If you haven't already given us a rating or review on Google Play or iTunes, that's so incredibly helpful for us because it helps other people find the show and grow the community a little bit.
From both of us here at Shots in the Dark,
we hope we've left you shaken,
not stirred.
Bye.
Bye.